Hello and welcome to episode 286 of the official EstablishTheRun.com podcast. My name is Adam Levitan. I am one of the co-founders here at ETR, and we are coming off of a cheap running backs attack kind of week. Yes, that's right. The optimal in week 10 turned out to be playing not just Dearness Johnson, shout out AAF, not just Dearness and Mark Ingram, shout out age model, but the optimal was to play Dearness, Ingram, and Rhamondre Stevenson. Shout out Fat Mondre. Shout out Team Preseason. That's what ended up being correct. And honestly, that was a bit fortunate. You know, Dearness and Ingram had really rough first halves, got a bit fortunate late with them in the second half, and expensive running backs like Jonathan Taylor, Ezekiel Elliott, Dalvin Cook, Najee Harris, Christian McCaffrey, DeAndre Swift. They all had really, really nice days, but none went completely nuke, which allowed the cheap guys to sneak in there as what ended up being correct. So yeah, you know, certainly a clean run out for the cheap running backs in week 10, but that still hammers home the point that fading cheap 3 down plus goal line running backs is really, really tough. Like, it's the hardest fade in NFL DFS. It's just so different when we run into cheap running backs or cheap tight ends. Like, those guys still have to fight. Those guys still have to earn fantasy production through talent. Most running backs, you know, when getting 3 down plus goal line work in an every down scenario, it's really hard for them to fail. Not impossible, but hard. I did want to discuss Rhamondre Stevenson quickly from a micro perspective. So if you played preseason DFS with us just a few months ago, you're very likely familiar with Rhamondre. I mean, he was awesome. Broke the slate a couple times with huge runs, played really well in the pass game, which is something he showed in college too. You know, for a big guy, he actually plays really well in the pass game, just really explosive. And I was actually going to play him a decent amount on Sunday in week 10, not in cash, but in tournaments. And then I started thinking about how quick the hook could be from Belichick if Rhamondre messes up in pass protection. Like, I knew that Rhamondre wasn't going to play a ton of pass downs anyways. I knew he didn't practice all week due to the concussion. And then around 12:40 Eastern Sunday morning, you know, Patriots beat writers are tweeting that Brandon Bolden is out there warming up with the starters. So I was a coward and I got off the Rhamondre stuff that I had. And looking back, I mean, that was a mistake for 2 reasons. First, we know the Patriots are just so desperate for playmakers on offense anywhere. I mean, they're lacking talent so desperately. And Rhamondre is certainly a playmaker. I mean, we saw it in the preseason. Second, Brandon Bolden is a special teamer and JJ Taylor has barely been active. And finally, you know, most importantly, I mean, we had Stevenson projected for 5.6% ownership on DraftKings. Ingram we projected for 38% and Dearness for 41%. And so, yeah, we had Stevenson projected for significantly less points than those other two, but he's clearly the most explosive of the trio. And this ownership leverage, my God. So, yeah, you know, I wish I had thought that through some more. Pretty clear mistake, I think, on Rhamondre, regardless of results. A couple more things to get to DFS-wise, but want to remind everyone of 2 things. First, we've reduced our rest of season NFL price to $149.99. That includes props, Discord, everything we do through the Super Bowl. And second, NBA props team is blasting off so many bets 7 days a week. They're already 114-63 on the season with like 5 months to go. That's a separate sub from the NBA DFS. Check it out. Okay, as for cash in week 10, I don't really think there's much to say. You know, the ETR optimal, in other words, the best lineup based on our projections, ended up as the Stone Nuts. You know, and it wasn't hard to find it. Like, it was a huge, huge train in cash. I did think about going Jonathan Taylor, Jerry Jeudy, Tyler Conklin over James Conner, Keenan Allen, Dan Arnold. And, you know, maybe I should have, simply because I personally thought the spot for Arizona and James Conner was a bit overrated. You know, I mean, people keep disrespecting this Panthers defense. They're still second, came into the game second in yards per play allowed. And Colt McCoy was starting for Arizona. And honestly, we didn't know exactly what Arizona would do with James Conner. How much would Eno Benjamin play? And Eno Benjamin actually ended up getting 2 out of the first 6 carries, you know, pretty early before the blowout. And then as for JT, you know, or I could have played Najee or Dalvin, like, they were obviously such slam dunk plays. But we actually had the ceiling projection on the Connor Keenan side higher. And Jeudy, I mean, there's so much target competition now for Jeudy in Denver with Teddy Bridgewater, kind of shaky quarterback. I decided to stick. And even in hindsight, you know, I think this was a coin flip. as for tournaments, my best team was on FanDuel, and it was a Dak stack. And one thing I wanted to say about that, one thing I try to do is think about the cash quarterback for each site. And, this is one way that playing cash a lot allows you to benefit while playing tournaments. I knew the cash quarterback on DraftKings was Dak Prescott. So obviously, it was so obvious due to price and roster construction that Dak was the cash quarterback on DraftKings. And then I knew the cash quarterback for similar reasons on FanDuel was Josh Allen. So basically in GPPs, I try to flip that, especially in the higher stakes, smaller field stuff that I'm playing, the cash guys can get really outsized ownership. So in other words, on DraftKings, play more Josh Allen. On FanDuel, play more Dak. So on FanDuel, I played a Dak double, in the 4-4-4 on FanDuel, 4-4-4 buy-in, I was able to get Dak at 13%, CD at 12, Amari at 10, brought it back with Pitts, just a really easy and clear double/bring back for how I like to play because it's legit 3 stars in the double stack. Also knocked out the tight end spot with the bring back, and I left open 3 running back spots on the strongest running back week in the history of DFS. Actually, the key to this team, though, which got 5th, was the Eagles defense. And I know we talk about it a ton, and there's just so many reasons it's so bad to play high-owned defenses in DFS tournaments. The variance is just so high. There's almost no correlation between ownership and result. Also, very little correlation between projection and result. So a great way to separate from the field in a realistic way is low-owned defense that goes off. I had Eagles in this lineup. Shout out to Brandon Thorne for highlighting that mismatch the Eagles defensive line had with the Broncos offensive line. Broncos obviously playing without 2 of their starting tackles. He highlighted that in his article. So, Eagles end up with 15 points. Makes a big difference. By the way, got a listener question from OG Inquisitor. He said, if you could know before lock the highest scoring player at any one position, what position would you want the answer to? And yeah, it's so obviously defense for me. I mean, you can just break the slate so easily at 1%. So if I was the only person who knew that, Dallas defense at 1% was going to break the slate, that's such a huge advantage. Last thing for tournaments, I had the Dalvin Cook, Mike Williams mini on that FanDuel team I was just talking about. And my God, man, I mean, Big Mike Williams was somehow 39.2% owned in this tournament. These kind of receivers, Mike Evans, Mike Williams, the high ADOT, the touchdown scoring types, their range of outcomes is so wide. And it makes them a great GPP play at low ownership. But having Mike Williams at 40% owned is actually humiliating. And as your king GPP bro, I'm ashamed. And I think while the Big Mike thing was somewhat of a surprise and how popular he was, we talked about that more on Monday with Leone if you guys saw the tournament review show. But Big Mike was somewhat of a surprise. We knew Mike Evans would be incredibly owned going in. Come on, Mike Evans at 6,900 at 34% owned in the Millie Maker might be one of the worst plays in DFS history, especially when we had DK Metcalf, Steph Diggs, Terry McLaurin, Justin Jefferson, and others, at not much more salary, but a fraction of the ownership. Last thing, the second ever Established the Run subscriber league went down on Sunday. It was a 1,500 person, $5 buy-in, 3 max, rake free. If you want to get in next week, you need the link from our subscriber only Discord. But big congrats to Piano Keys for taking it down. He had the Josh Allen single stack with Steph Diggs correlated at punt tight end with Ryan Griffin, had D'Ernest, Rhamondre, Jonathan Taylor at running back, and then slammed the one off with Justin Jefferson. Just really nice team from Piano Keys. Congrats on taking it down. All right. Enough is enough. Let's get to everyone's favorite portion of the program, the listener questions. Producer Luke, hit the theme music. All right. Thanks to everyone for the questions. Got a bunch that I'm going to get to today and a bunch I will get to next week. Question 1 comes from Alec Golden. He says, what are a few of your least favorite things in life? Could be big or small, specific or general. I mean, this is an easy one. It is NFL fan Twitter. I mean, holy fucking shit. I have never seen anything like this. It is just incredible. And I want to be clear here. I love Twitter. I think some of the smartest people in the world are on Twitter. The best and fastest information is on Twitter. It's just the best. If you want to be good at fantasy football and probably a lot of other things too, you need to be on Twitter. It's like mandatory. And I actually love most people in DFS Twitter too. I think it's a lot of really sharp and funny people. What I am referring to though, is this hellscape known as NFL fan Twitter. I mean, these are people with like Fins Up or Steelers Nation in their profile, and they're like the fans, super fans of teams, players, coaches. They'll defend the jersey, they'll defend the clothes, the laundry at all costs. And that's cool, like whatever. You want to be a fan? I get it. But these people are an example of what's wrong with society, like on so many levels. They will defend their team blindly, attack any criticism of that team viciously, just show zero reasonableness, self-awareness, intelligence. It's just insane. So if you recall, I had a tweet earlier this year about first round running backs, real life first round running backs in the draft, not fantasy ones, and about how insane it is to take one. And, you know, it's just, my God, I'm talking thousands of Raiders and Steelers and Jaguars fans just flaming my mentions with the worst takes for days. It was maddening. And you think I would have learned my lesson, right? But I didn't. On Sunday, I tweeted about how fucking egregious it was for the Dolphins to give up a 2022 first round pick for the right to move up a few spots so they could take a non-quarterback in Jalen Waddle. Holy shit, man. My mentions for the last 3 days are just zero IQ Dolphins fans going ham on me. I mean, absolutely ham. And they're either too dumb or, you know, more likely too team obsessed, which is dumb in itself, but whatever. You know, they just don't understand the tweet. I think Jalen Waddle's fine. I think Devonta Smith is fine. Whatever. It doesn't matter. I have zero takes about who is good and who isn't. I have no player talent takes. They can't grasp that these micro takes around players is irrelevant. The whole idea of the NFL draft is understanding that no one knows. Hit rates are so incredibly low. The point is to get as many early round picks as possible, get as many darts at the board as you can, and try to hit on one or two of them through volume. Not micro player takes. Not saying I have to get a receiver here. I have to get Jalen Waddle here. So giving up a first round pick to get your man in Jalen Waddle or any non-quarterback, I mean, it's just so obviously wrong. It doesn't matter what you think of Jalen Waddle. It doesn't matter what other trades you made. But whatever, you know, these Dolphins fans just don't get it. And honestly, this is what I hate about politics and religion and a zillion other things. Logic or reason does not matter to these people. If a Republican says the sky is blue, a Democrat has to say that it's red, whether they believe it or not, you know, and vice versa. If a person who believes in one religion says God is this, the other religion can't accept that. And there's just like wars and bloodshed over it constantly. It's just horribly insane. And in this case, if someone like me simply says giving up a potential top 10 pick for Jalen Waddle is bad, the Dolphins fans have to call that person a dumb motherfucker. You know, DM them hate and middle fingers. You know, I essentially said that I'd rather have a 2022 first round pick and another blue chip player, you know, Devonta Smith or anyone else, doesn't matter if it's Devonta, than just Jalen Waddle. And you would think that I've told these Dolphins Twitter fans that I had sex with their mom or something. So yeah, Alec, all that is a long way of saying NFL fan Twitter is one of my least favorite things in life. And actually, I'm sure you guys have noticed that Silva doesn't tweet as much as he used to. I think NFL fan Twitter just broke him, you know, like dealing with these like mouth breathing, zero IQ, you know, fans can do that. All right. Question 2 from Pat Thorman. Of course, you know him from the uniquely valuable pace column on ETR, our weekly rankings for season long. True King, love Thorman. He says, have you noticed negative correlation on the PSM from more defenses taking a quote unquote too deep approach? Yeah, you know, Thorman's such an incredible writer and apparently such a great question asker as well. Very funny, Thorman. I'm not going to address this joke, though, as Gender Labs LLC, aka Gender Consultants, is a very, very serious company. But I will address this cover 2 nonsense. I think it's really hard for the human brain to grasp how small of a sample 1 or 2 or 3 or even 4 NFL games are. And it's also hard for us to grasp how close these teams are once you account for variance. So everyone's just out here trying to grasp at anything, any explanation for what happens on the field to sound smart. And I'm 100% guilty of this also. But a lot of times the answer is simply randomness, variance, I mean, the narrative that was out there that you could just, we're playing Patrick Mahomes, we're playing Josh Allen, we're playing Dak Prescott. Well, we'll just play cover 2 and we'll stop them. That's why they're playing bad, because teams found out all you have to do is play cover 2 against them. I mean, I'm no football guy. My hand is most certainly not in the dirt. I am most certainly not on Team Watch the Games. But I would think that this has been tried before. And I'm pretty certain that Mahomes and Allen and Dak have a counter. So yeah, I get that everyone wants to explain away bad performances from great players. Sometimes, a lot of times, it's just a fluke, I think the book by Taleb, Fooled by Randomness, certainly applies here, and I'd encourage people to check that out for sure. Question 3 from Christopher. He says, when using your settings on DraftKings for fantasy labs, are they tailored to specifically building cash lineups, or is that the default GPP builder? So Chris is referring to the add-on offer that we have with Fantasy Labs. In other words, like we don't have an optimizer on ETR, but if you go to the subscribe tab, you can add on the Labs optimizer, and it will come with preloaded of our projections, assuming you have an ETR subscription. To answer Chris's question, I would not be using any of the Fantasy Labs model settings or ratings. When you go to optimize lineups, it will ask you what you want to optimize by. If you're using ETR projections and you want to see maybe, our 10 best projected cash teams, I do it by optimizing with projected points, period. Just projected points. For tournaments, you can optimize by our ceiling projections. And then you would also add rules like must stack quarterback with at least one pass catcher, must include at least player with less than 10% projected ownership in each lineup. That's starting to get into deeper territory, more of Dink's area. I just wanted to be clear for Chris's question. I think optimizing by simply projected points or ceiling off our projections is best, not using any of the Fantasy Labs ratings or models. Question 4 from Ryan Hodge. He says, friend of the show, Ryan Hodge. He says, how much screen time is too much screen time? And he attached a screenshot saying he's had like 21 hours per day of screen time or something absurd like that. I never trust that thing. Obviously Ryan's not on his phone 21 hours a day. It doesn't seem to be accurate, but come on, Ryan. Like, even if it's close to accurate, we got to be on Team Smell the Roses, man. Like, even in this up-only environment, even when NFL and NBA are overlapping, even with DFS and props overlapping, the priority still has to be the Roses. I think I've mentioned this before, but I used to have an app on my phone that would remind me I was going to die, literally. So like every 4 hours, it would push an alert that would basically say, you could die tomorrow, act accordingly in like a variety of clever ways. And obviously it's not practical to optimize for dying tomorrow or next month or even next year. But I really do think that understanding the next 5 to 10 years are not guaranteed for anyone is a good way to be sure you stay on the team. Both teams, Team Sex and Team Smell the Roses. Question 5 from the Joker. He says, is COVID the best thing to happen to prop betting? It seems the DFS nerds do better in the chaos when players are out compared to the books. He says, for example, with Embiid and Tobias Harris out this past week, the Drummond overs were free cash. Yeah, sure. I mean, the more moving parts, I think the better it is for sharp people. Like, books just aren't good at adjusting to new info, or at least, not as good as us. So when Embiid and Harris go out, we adjust projections and feel good. They're just like randomly guessing. I don't think that there's going to be a ton of value on things like, Joel Embiid points props when everyone is healthy at midseason. It's just really easy to model and project that. But as I've said 1,000 times before, like, chaos is not the only reason we're crushing in props. Like, we're up to 99-50 in NFL through week 10 and 114-63 in NBA through November 14th. The reason we can do this is it's because we have the best model. We have the best people working on projections. We have them working around the clock. We also have context around the projections to know when stuff that may look like a bet, but it actually isn't. And most importantly, you know, I think our biggest edge is that the books are posting hundreds and thousands of lines, prop lines a week. And we pick off, you know, 10 or 20 of them in NFL or 3 to 10 of them a night in NBA. Like, of course we're going to win. Like, of course. It's just too much ground for the books to cover. So, yeah, back to Joker's question. I mean, chaos is great, but props really are the DFS nerd wet dream. It's really gone even better than I thought was possible. Question 6 from Tyler. He says, how does it feel now that the shower narrative has gone mainstream via Matthew Berry's Twitter? Yeah, so Barry's a friend of the show, obviously. Know he listens and reads, etc. The best part, though, is that his following, you know, Barry's following is very casual. It's a broad ESPN base, you know. It's not people grinding their dicks off like us. So on Sunday, when Mason Rudolph hit James Washington for a touchdown, Barry tweeted about it, and he mentioned the shower narrative. And just to reiterate for anyone not familiar, this is a joke I've been doing for, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years about guys who went to college together, presumably formed a bond in the shower back in those college days, and therefore, if they play together in the NFL, they'll have better chemistry. You know, Rudolph and James Washington were like legit boys at Oklahoma State. PJ Walker and Robbie Anderson at Temple. You know, this past draft, there were a ton. You know, Tua and Waddle, Hurts and Devontae Smith for a season, etc. More. But anyway, so Barry tweets the shower narrative with like no explanation, you know, no context. And the responses are so funny, you know, like my mom knows who Barry is. You know, Tom from accounting knows Barry. And these people's minds are just blown. Like they have no idea what he's talking about. It's so good. Also, I don't know if you guys saw during the Monday Night Football game before the Rams 49ers game, ESPN did like a whole bit about the breakfast narrative with Stafford and Kupp, you know, did a whole joke about it. So yeah, you know, it's great. The shower narrative going mainstream is so good. I'm waiting for Tom Rinaldi to like be doing an in-depth tearjerker piece and be like, so Mo Alley Cox, how frustrating is it to be breaking the PSM, but still running fewer routes per game than Jack Doyle, you know? That'll be the icing on the cake. All right, question 7 from Shane. He says, which is a bigger sucker move, paying for porn or putting a 1 p.m. guy in the flex? Oh, I mean, it's clearly paying for porn. I mean, 1 p.m. player in the flex, you know, when you're a ham building bro, you know, mistakes happen. It happens. Mistakes happen, but it's not the end of the world, you know. But I mean, you have to be one sick fuck to pay for porn these days. I mean, really sick, which sounds crazy to say now that because like all this porn is free, obviously. But man, when I was growing up, we literally had to steal Playboys from 7-Eleven, or like someone somehow would get a VHS tape and like pass it around. I remember my buddy Jeff had some like weird milk thing tape that like we passed around. I mean, you know, simpler times, man. Wild times, but simpler times. All right, question 8. Last question we're going to do today comes from Travis. He says, are you going to do the annual podcast where you bitch and throw a fit about Thanksgiving food? I really need it. Yeah, I don't think so, man. I mean, I think I've said all I need to say about Thanksgiving. I'm, of course, dreading it. You know, oh, Adam, you're so silly. Why won't you eat this duck? Eat this duck carcass wrapped in a chicken carcass, wrapped in a turkey carcass, you know, with stuffing shoved up its barren asshole. Oh, you're so crazy, Adam. You're so silly. You know, I can't take it. All right, I'll leave it at that. Happy early Thanksgiving. That is going to do it for this edition of the Solo Pod. We'll be back later tonight with Silva to go team by team. If you're not subscribed to this podcast, remember it is free. Anywhere podcasts are found, hit the subscribe button. Again, it is free. Helps us out a bunch. For producer Luke, for Jerry, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.